Find out how a CPA turned college professor went on to become an executive at a real estate service provider. Mitchell Rusbarsky offers us timeless wisdom on the business of real estate.
If I understand accounting, to expand on that, if I understand how to read financial statements, then I should be a solid businessman. I should be able to be productive and make a contribution to whatever industry I find myself.
Hello and welcome to the Lease Alert, where we have conversations with the smartest, most interesting people at the intersection of real estate, leasing, and accounting. I'm your host, Matt Waters. Let's learn something together. Today, I am honored to have my friend Mitchell Rusbarsky on with me. You know, this is a podcast where we talk about the very interesting intersection of real estate, leasing, and accounting. And honestly, I can't think of any one person whose career matches up exactly with the theme of this podcast as Mitchell. He works for Cushman Wakefield. He's a managing director in the financial advisory practice there, and he serves big clients all over the world. He's also a CPA. He has his MCR from Cornet, which stands for Master of Corporate Real Estate. But first, Mitchell, welcome to the Lease Alert Podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here. And I'm so excited about your second season. You're doing so well. And it's a pleasure to catch up with you after our conference last fall. I really enjoy being a co-instructor with you at the Cornet Summit and their other webinars. So this is a real treat for me to share a little bit about my background and to support your webcast.
Oh, thank you, Mitch. I already described a little bit about your job at Cushman Wakefield, or I gave your title at least, but I want to ask you a little bit more about that. Basically, what does your job involve these days?
It's a job that I've loved for many, many years, and I'll give you some of that information that you look for here. Just a little bit about Cushman. Cushman is a mid-cap company. We're like a $3 billion market cap, give or take the status of the stock market. Our stock is currently traded at about $11.70. Our earnings just came out last week. We earned $9.4 billion in 2024.
Wow.
Our net income grew to $166 million, and that was a significant increase over 2023. So that's just a little bit about our company. But my role is commercial real estate advisory. You could say consulting, if you like. Our clients are generally very large publicly traded companies, and they call on us to help them evaluate significant lease arrangements or opportunities. Sometimes those occupancy requirements, as they call them, not only entail leases, complex leases, but also acquisitions of buildings that which they would occupy for the most part. So that gets us involved with evaluating for our clients existing buildings, build-to-suits, acquisitions, even consolidating, let's say, multiple facilities within a metro area, which comes about quite a bit with the M&A process or an outcome of M&A, because companies will acquire other companies and there might be redundancy in their real estate portfolio. Clients need Cushman Wakefield and myself to help them evaluate. We have to measure capital expenditures, of course, discounted cash flows, but with my credentials, I'm able to help them understand the P&L impact to many of these potential transactions. And it's only gotten more complicated the last several years, as you know. FASB changed the accounting rules, which were known for many, many decades to be FASB 13. The code was ASC 840, and the change came about in 2019, mandatory change to ASC 842, where all leases would be on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
So our role and our involvement with our clients became much more complicated with those change in accounting rules. That keeps us very busy. And Our transactions require multiple years to complete, generally, the large ones. It can be with lots of evaluation and lots of iteration required to get the board approval. Board approval is, at that point, these transactions are highly scrutinized and they really require special expertise and resources and, frankly, leadership to get them across the goal line.
Yeah. Well, you have certainly hit on a hot topic, Mitch. Matter of fact, in season 1 of the Lease Alert, I talked with Tim Colber, and his episode was actually so good, we had to make 2 episodes out of it. We had
Wow.
one episode kind of about his career. We had another episode about hot topics in lease accounting, and he brought up many of the same things that you just did: business combinations, right sizing of portfolios, and of course, having leases on the balance sheet with ASC 842. So, in talking with Tim and through my own experience, you get accounting experts involved, like Big Four, Deloitte type accounting experts like Tim involved, and you get real estate experts involved like Cushman and Wakefield. And you're right, they're multi-year transactions. There's a lot of moving pieces, but in the end, they have serious impacts on the financial statements, and in some cases even change earnings per share. The stock price of a company can rise and fall based on some of these large transactions. And
Mhm.
I'll just reference one other episode from season 1, and that's Alec Wynn. And Alec, he's a broker in Denver, and he had the biggest deal of his career, relocating a corporate headquarters from the outskirts of Denver, the suburbs, to downtown Denver. And the reason he was able to get the CEO to sign off on that deal, you got to hear Alec talk about it in season 1, but he got the CEO to sign off on the deal because he took the Cornet class that you and I and Alec now teach, real estate's impact on financial statements. It's part of the MCR program. And Alex said that changed his life. Literally. He said it was like winning a major in golf. It changed the whole trajectory of his career. And it was all because he understood what you understand as a CPA, that real estate can really move the needle on the financial statements. But I got to ask you, since you're a CPA, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you started your career in accounting and not real estate, because a lot of people that pick up expertise along the way, and there are many, a lot of real estate professionals have picked up expertise in accounting, but you're a CPA. So I'm guessing you got an accounting degree and got your CPA license and then somehow made your way into real estate. So I'd love to hear that story. Basically, how did you get to where you are?
Your explanation and comments there, I find very interesting and resonate with me. Yes, it's interesting for me to think back about the connection between my earlier career, which was traditional accounting, and how it wound up in corporate real estate financial advisory and consulting with Cushman and Wakefield. So, yes, I did study accounting in school, and I was always entrepreneurial before I entered college. And so I knew I wanted to get into business, but there was several influences. My older brother being one who was 3 grades ahead of me, he was studying accounting. So that certainly had a major impact. He went on to get a PhD, and maybe I'll reference that a little bit more. But I knew I wanted to get into business because I had some sense of entrepreneurial spirit in my early life, if you want to call it that. But when I took that first mandatory principles of accounting, I think you can relate to this. Maybe everyone can relate to this. They emphasized that accounting was the language of business. And I can almost visually remember that professor speaking that in my mind all those years ago. And so that really resonated with me. And I thought, if I understand accounting, to expand on that, if I understand how to read financial statements, then I should be a solid businessman. I should be able to be productive and make a contribution to whatever industry I find myself. And that's what I did. I went ahead, I was inspired enough with my my brother's involvement and these influences from professors to go on and earn my accounting degree. So eventually I even went on to get a master's degree. The accounting degree was at the University of Kansas. The master's degree was at the University of Arizona. I'll come back to that a little bit. So right out of graduate school, I went to work for Arthur Andersen, a Big
Hmm.
Five accounting. It was a Big Eight and then became
Yeah.
the Big Five after all the consolidations. So I was a auditor there, and I enjoyed that for a couple of years. There's so much talent with auditors, or that auditors provide and contribute. It's amazing. Always very respectful and appreciative of auditors.
Hmm.
But I wanted to do something different. Actually, what I found is kind of inadvertently discovered that I like teaching, which was really a key part of my graduate program. I had full responsibilities for teaching principles of accounting classes, and
Hmm.
that stuck with me for many, many years, even while I was a auditor at Arthur Andersen. So there came a point where I decided that would be an interesting career objective. And I think, once again, the fact that my brother and actually I have a sister who are in grad school and both earned their PhDs, I
Hmm.
was contemplating that as a possible role. So I did go into full-time teaching. I wanted to try it out. I did not want to, like my siblings, invest time into a PhD program without really getting a flavor for the lifestyle of being a teacher. So went into teacher, did that at Cal Poly. For some of you who know the California schools, Cal Poly Technique State University in San Luis Obispo, 2 years there, 2 years at Loyola Marymount University, which is in the Los Angeles area. Earlier, I found I had an interest in real estate in general as a way to create wealth, if you would. And
Hmm.
I have to say, while I was a instructor on the faculty at Loyola Marymount, I ventured out in just kind of beginner's luck, made an investment in a parcel of raw land through a judicial foreclosure. That's a mouthful. If I told you the price I paid for this in an auction, you would be floored and you wouldn't believe it. But it was a grand slam. And frankly, that was a huge turning point for me. I thought, wow, real estate looks like an interesting, viable opportunity.
Hmm.
And so I jumped into real estate at that point. I was still teaching, but I sat for the broker's license, passed it the first time. And then after my 2 years were up, I went into real estate, actually on the sales side for a number of years, about 5 years. And then through that initial introduction into real estate, I found kind of that perfect niche for me where I could really apply my accounting skills, my CPA, and work in a more sophisticated capital markets kind of role, which evolved to advisory. So, an
Hmm.
advisory capacity that I'm in.
That's such a great story. You know, I think the first thing I'll say is just a comment. I mentioned Alec Wynn at the start of this. He felt like he won a major in golf in this intersection of real estate and accounting because he understood what earnings per share did to the stock price of this company, and he motivated behavior. Knowledge is power, right? He understood that, and then he was able to motivate an entire corporation to change course and move the corporate headquarters. He said it's like winning a major in golf. You just said you had a major transaction in your career, if you will. You called it a grand slam, but still, like it's a major, right? This intersection of accounting and leasing and real estate has affected the careers of so many, and there's just so much opportunity here. So I just wanted to call that out to start with. Tell me about how you got on at Cushman and Wakefield. Who hired you?
Oh, sure. That was really exciting. John Cushman hired me, the late John Cushman.
What?
And
Mr. Cushman hired you?
yeah, the late
Wow.
John Cushman hired me. It was actually technically Cushman Realty at the time,
Mhm.
based in Los Angeles. I didn't mention, but maybe you did, that I live in the Los Angeles area. But I had to move up here from the San Diego area when I was hired, and I wanted to. The opportunity was great, but late John Cushman hired me, brought me on, and I came into a department which they call real estate services,
Hmm.
and it had a consulting focus to it. My leader at the time, Andy Ratner, came from KPMG, so we did all kind of things, worked on and evaluated development opportunities. There were some high-rise buildings in downtown that didn't exist when I came on board, and we ran the numbers, so to speak. We did
Hmm.
other consulting work up and down the coast of California. That was very exciting work at the time. My other boss was a CPA, Grant Freeman. The two of them, I think one of them is still in the real estate industry, but that's where I cut my teeth, so to speak. And it was
Cool.
an incredible experience. That was a tenant rep firm. It's interesting to think back. The industry was very different when I came into it
Hmm.
approximately 30 years ago. It was not as sophisticated as it is today. It was pre-internet, if you would, and there was not as much information or data out there. And now, this is old news, but you have REITs that
Hmm.
we all follow that manage and own much of the real estate property throughout the globe, if you would. And
Hmm.
there's much information available, very different. And so it's become much, much more corporate
Hmm.
and over that time span where before it was more single, they used to call it kind of a cowboy kind of
Right.
experience is now very team focused.
Hmm.
Lots of specialties come together to complete real estate transactions or to work on real estate portfolio and the accounts associated with that. It's really evolved.
No kidding. Yeah. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, but first I'll just say our listeners can tell, I know, that Mitchell, you are an expert in your field, and I'll just put in a shameless plug for Cornet. Mitchell is on faculty for the Cornet MCR program. He teaches 2 finance classes, and as you know now, after hearing his story, he's one of the most qualified faculty members because he actually has been a professor in the university setting. So if you get a chance to take an MCR class or go hear Mitchell talk at a Cornet Global Summit, you'll be glad you did. Believe me, I have. And I was glad that I went to Mitchell's class. But Mitchell, now I just want to ask you, we know a lot about your career now, but what do you do in your free time?
I feel really blessed. I have a rich life. I have 2 children, adult children now,
Hmm.
and they have their own places. They don't live in the home, but I'm fortunate enough that they live in the city.
Yeah.
So I get to see them pretty regularly. My wife and I are empty nesters. That's actually very, very exciting because we're able to travel a little bit more. We're not limited to a school calendar.
Right.
So we go on a trip in about a month or so, a cruise. I'm looking forward to that. But back to my children, we're in a big city. We love the fact that we're able to see them regularly. We're active with a lot of things. Sports used to be a big thing in our household. They played on various teams and whatnot. I would say our activities revolve around the church now, and it's a great opportunity for us to stay close as a family and to in a big city, understand it. That's really important to us to make sure we stay on track and we have,
Hmm.
faith together and whatnot here in the Los Angeles area. So I guess you could say I'm busy with family activities, hiking and whatnot in the church.
Hmm.
And that's how I, spend a lot of my personal time, free time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll tell you, we have more in common than I thought, and I love the professional commonalities that we have. But personally, too, I've got 3 kids. I'm a little behind you as far as that goes. I am still very squarely in the phase of life that we plan everything around a school calendar, right? But
Right.
that's where we are. But hey, I believe the same thing. We take our boys to church, study the Bible. Sounds like you're right there in that same frame of mind, same activities. So what got you started on that? Why'd you start taking your family to
I'm
church?
glad you asked. Yeah, I'm a fairly new Christian. But we always had a focus more recently in the last 5 years or more on learning the Bible. My wife and I were drawn to taking Bible study classes. And, I started out just having an interest in the book itself. We all, in the desire to read it, basically, read it from cover to cover. And I'm still working on that. It's a big book, as you know.
All right. Yeah.
But, now we study it. And I really was looking as a business person for some guidance in terms of integrity and how to be fair and forthcoming as a business person in my transactions. So
Mm.
it's interesting that that was kind of my focus all those years ago, 5+ years ago. Now, I granted, I grew up in a Catholic environment,
Mhm.
you know, so I've always been in a religious family, if you would. But in these last 5 years, just taking a deep dive, if you would, into the Bible, attending Bible study regularly has been made all the difference. And my kids, I want to lead the family in the same fashion. So it's really rewarding that my adult children have followed that, and they're good kids. They're
Yeah.
on their journey as well. We get to witness that and give guidance as necessary. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
background. Does that help you with the question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just so encouraging to me because I think along the same lines, and you're right. The Bible is a source of wisdom, even for business. So let me just give you some examples from the past couple of weeks in my life.
Sure.
I had one friend related to his business. He was feeling overwhelmed. And basically, it's a story that replays itself all around the world every day. I think leaders get overwhelmed. They try to take on too much. And I gave him some advice that I got from the book of Exodus, which is the second book of the Bible, Exodus 18. Moses's father-in-law, a guy named Jethro, and that was his real name. I can't help it. I'll think of the Beverly Hillbillies, right?
Yeah.
But but Jethro
Yeah.
gave him advice on delegation, and it plays out beautifully, right? He was trying to do too much. His father-in-law, who was wise, gave him advice on delegation. Then there's Proverbs. You talked about being a fair businessman. Well, Proverbs is full of advice on how to be fair and honest, and basically it's advice on practical steps for a good life, right? Matter of fact, something that's really popular these days with quote influencers is being sober curious. This concept of giving up alcohol for a period of time and see how it makes you feel and see if it helps your performance and your thought, your thought process, your workouts. So sober curious is kind of a hot topic in today's society. Well, I'll tell you, I decided to take a break from drinking about 6 months ago, but it was because I read something in Proverbs that hit me a different way than it ever had before. In Proverbs 31, basically the translation that I was reading, which was the Message, it said, drinking too much is not for leaders. It didn't say drinking is wrong. It just said drinking too much is not for leaders because you might get drunk and you might let down the people that depend on you.
Right.
Wow. I thought about my children. I was like, well, yeah, maybe I need to look at this a little. I kind of had a glass of wine or a beer here and there, but again, it's very relevant. And then one more, one more story I'll give you.
I love that story.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. One more story, and this ties into Cornett, actually. Brady Mick and Tracy Browers gave a excellent speech at Cornett this past year in DC, and it was about storytelling. And basically, Brady and Tracy said that you can drive organizational behavior and change by using stories as a tool. And I was thinking about that even while I was sitting in their very stimulating presentation. I was sitting there thinking, well, this is what Jesus did. And you can read about that in the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah.
Jesus, that's all he did basically was he went around trying to drive change by telling stories. In the Bible, Bible terms, we call them parables, but that's what they are. They're stories with a point that you're supposed to learn a lesson from. So all that to say, wow, I totally agree with you. The Bible is a source of relevant knowledge for business today.
Yeah. That's a beautiful information that you shared there. There's a book, maybe you know it. It's called the Leadership Bible. I want to say by an author, John Maxwell. Have you heard of that one?
I have not heard of that exact book, but I've heard of John Maxwell. Yeah.
Right. Well, I was intrigued with the book. You would not find this in the bookstore of most universities, my guess. I never did,
Right.
but I've had that particular book. Once again, it's called the Leadership Bible, and it's the entire Bible. And he has commentary which really interprets the leadership opportunities and characteristics that are demonstrated within each chapter. I look at that particular Bible almost every day. I was carrying it with me at service just yesterday. Sunday was yesterday. I would recommend it. It's very unique. I think any business person would find it very unique. And it's helped me to go deeper in my dealings in business, in my interaction with coworkers. I have a staff of 8 that I work with. It gives me guidance and direction and support for how to interact with my direct reports. I strongly urge it for every business person to have it on their shelf.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. Basically, it's ancient wisdom that we can apply directly to what we do today. So, Mitchell, I love that you brought this up. I think you're dead on. You can get so much wisdom by reading the Bible. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they're so knowledgeable. We think that, because it was ancient times many, many years ago, that perhaps they weren't intelligent, but or working in kind of the same sort of core issues. But you illustrated that quite well, that they were challenged just like we find ourselves from time to time being challenged with projects that we work on. Yeah.
Mitchell, it's been an honor to have you on the Lease Alert. I hope you'll come back sometime, and I really hope I get to see you at a Cornet event coming up. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Lease Alert. I'd be grateful if you would like and subscribe wherever you listen. Until next time, keep learning and leasing.